Brian Flannery, thank you for your support. Thank you, Cigna, for making our breakfast possible this morning. And again, as I mentioned before, keeping us fueled for what as you mentioned, I think is going to be an action-packed day, one with a lot of insights and one that hopefully we'll all focus on what the takeaways are, what we can do with this information as we go back, whether it's Cleveland, Ohio, whether it's New York, New England, California. We're looking for hopefully informing next steps and something in the way of actionable strategies we can all take back. That's our goal. It always has been, and hopefully we'll be able to implement some of that today. I really don't need to make this introduction, but I will. And I'll introduce him as Dr. Terry O'Sullivan, recipient recently of a honorary degree at the New York College of Podiatric Medicine. So Terry O'Sullivan, without question, is a leading force, certainly in the labor movement as it evolves, and in many cases just moves through a very challenging, very uncertain, and extremely dynamic environment. You all know he is General President of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America. He is, without question, bringing today insights from that truly North American perspective, but as I mentioned earlier, especially some insights into that very evolving, very dynamic, very uncertain environment in and around Washington. LIUNA, as all you know, and many of you know anyway, literally and figuratively builds America. They have membership across a diversity of industries: construction, hazardous waste mitigation, state municipal governments, postal service, healthcare, maintenance, and food services. So you've got a tremendous perspective, I think, here, certainly, and we sincerely look forward. We are so blessed each time when Terry can come down and join us and really share his perspectives. Please join me in welcoming Terry to the platform.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, it's always a tough sacrifice to leave the hellhole of Washington, D.C. and come to sunny Florida in the wintertime, but I always enjoy coming. Thank you, Bill, for that very kind introduction. Anybody that's ever been an MC of a meeting or a conference can attest how difficult it is. So let's give it up for the great job that Bill does each and every year for this conference. Brothers and sisters, it's an honor and a privilege to be here today at this conference of the NLMC with all the dedicated and committed trade unionists of the American labor movement, our management partners, the professionals and vendors, and in particular with all my strong, proud, and united brothers and sisters of the Laborers International Union of North America. Before I make some comments and then open the floor to questions, I want to recognize a few people. I'm in my 18th year of being proudly president of Laborers International. And for those 18 years, I've had the benefit of having a true partner every step of the way. Armin Sabatoni serves as our General Secretary Treasurer. He is my brother and my friend, and each and every initiative of our international union has his fingerprints on it. So give it up for a great leader, a great friend, our Secretary Treasurer, Armin Sabatoni. We have a number of vice presidents with us as well. Vinnie Massino from New England region. Denny Martyr from the Mid-Atlantic region. As Bill talked, the National Postal Mail Handlers who are part of LIUNA, and their president, Paul Hagrogian, who somewhere, there he is. And their Secretary Treasurer of the National Postal Mail Handlers, Mark Gardner. A guy that I would be remiss if I didn't recognize who established this conference, Lou Levine. Somebody that I have the utmost respect and admiration for. He's not only an excellent doctor, a distinguished academic, and a proud veteran, but he's a great trade unionist who's one of the finest, most decent individuals that I've ever known. I was never more honored than last year when Lou conferred upon me an honorary doctorate from the New York College of Podiatric Medicine. Lou, I want you to know that I will never forget that. So thank you, Lou, for all that you do for this conference and improving the lives of working men and women in our great country. Give it up for Lou Levine, please. I also want to thank Barbara McCabe and all the great work that she does putting this conference together. We're the beneficiaries, so thank you, Barbara. So this morning I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to talk about infrastructure. I'm going to talk quickly about health care and the challenges and opportunities that I see with this new president and with this new Congress. But first, since I got asked about 100 times yesterday about my recent meeting with the president and what happened, I'll spend a couple of seconds talking about it. Look, this was a hard-fought election, and like many of you, Lionel was a staunch and vocal supporter of Secretary Clinton, like many of you, no matter who. Most of the people, whether it was Bernie supporters, but we were Hillary supporters, and it was a hard-fought election. And at the end of the day, our motto is this, is that we'll work with anybody that we can and fight with everybody that we have to. And so it was interesting that on Sunday, after the inauguration, I, along with 4 other building trades presidents, were invited to the White House on Monday to have a meeting with the president. And I went to that meeting along with Sean McGarvey, the president of National Building Trades, Mark McManus, the new president of the UA, Doug McCarron, the president of the Carpenters, myself, and Joe Sellers, the president of the Sheet Metal Workers. And at that meeting, I've had some dealings with President Trump before in my capacity as the CEO and chairman of Ullico. As a matter of fact, through the J for Jobs program, Donald Trump, when he wasn't President Donald Trump, had borrowed over $231 million from J for Jobs. I might add, we got it all back, and we made interest, and we had a good relationship with him on that front. But at that meeting, the president had all his key staff. The vice president was there, Chief of Staff Priebus, Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, who you've seen in the press, the senior policy advisor, Kellyanne Conway, and Sean Spicer. Some of the items that were talked about at that meeting were TPP, NAFTA, infrastructure, which I'll get into a little later, the energy sector, particularly Keystone Pipeline and Dakota Access Pipeline, and Davis-Bacon. On Davis-Bacon, the president had, and it was an interesting conversation, because I got asked, well, where is he on Davis-Bacon? And I can't honestly tell you, but I can tell you what was discussed. And Sean McGarvey and I talked at length about the importance of prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon Act, what it means to the trades, what it means to the men and women we proudly represent, and that it's the gold standard for us in the trades. And we talked about Senator Flake, who the next week was going to put in a bill to repeal in the Senate, repeal the Davis-Bacon Act. And he asked us whether we had the votes to defeat it. And I said, well, I know we have the votes in the House because we've had the votes in the House before. We have about 52 Republicans that vote with us. And I believe that we have the votes in the Senate as well, although it's going to be a little closer. And I said, the only thing is there going to be any fingers on the scale? And the president said, well, what do you have to worry about? I'm not exactly sure what I mean. We can read a whole bunch of things into it, and there is no guarantees, and I'm not standing before you to say that there is. But it was at least an interesting response to the question about and our concerns about Davis-Bacon. He then brought up, he says, well, you're going to be okay in New York, but you're not going to be okay in Phoenix or in Arizona. He brought that up because of Flake, and he's not a supporter or a fan of him, I should say, and in Florida. And we went on to say that at the end of the day, that's why the Davis-Bacon Act works, because our rates prevail in New York. They don't prevail in Florida, Arizona. So the Davis-Bacon Act does exactly what it was intended to do. So we'll see what happens going forward. I will say this, and those of you from New York will know this name and this individual who was a great, great, great labor leader, is that I brought up the name of Eddie Malloy. God rest his soul. Absolutely. Who was not only a great labor leader, but a great man. And when I brought that name up, you could see a smile on the president's face. And he went on for about 5 minutes about his good friend, his great friend, one of his best friends, Eddie Malloy. So out of respect to Eddie, and I'll tell you what, if you want to get a reaction out of the President of the United States, bring up Eddie Malloy's name, because he really was a good friend of his. That was on a Monday. The next day, less than 24 hours later, there was 5 executive orders that the president put out. One on Keystone, one on Dakota Access, one Buy American, and it pertained to American-manufactured pipe. And the 4th and 5th were to streamline the approval process and the environmental review process of infrastructure as well as pipeline projects, all of which LIUNA supports, all of which the building trades unions support. Those pipeline projects are huge. That was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we had made calls about 2 other pipelines that were in the FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Every natural gas pipeline in the country has to go through FERC process for approval. And it's a fairly lengthy process, but very thorough process. But it had been those two projects had been held up because of, excuse my French, political bullshit that had been going on in Washington, D.C. On Friday, 2 other pipeline projects were approved. Rover Pipeline, 12,000 construction jobs, 12,000. And the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline, which will put 5,000 construction workers to work. So from our perspective, we had an awful good first week. Now, we may be rolling in the mud, right, by the end of today. But at least it was a good step forward with the new administration along those lines. On infrastructure, the president talked, that's the good news on infrastructure is that the president's talking about it. Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats have put a proposal forth. The question is, how realistic are they today? And that question I can't answer for you, but I'll identify at least the proposals and some things that we probably need to be careful about. The president's plan, which they say now will come out in spring or fall, and it really depends on how much time and energy is spent on health care and tax reform. Have we not seen this movie before? President Obama comes into office. We thought we were going to get the Employee Free Choice Act teed up first and get it passed, but then the discussion and debate about Obamacare sucked all the life, not criticizing it, but sucked all the life out of the agenda, and we never got to the Employee Free Choice Act. So once again, we're dealing with health care, as well we should, an important subject matter for us and for our members, but we won't get to infrastructure until the whole issue with Obamacare and what they're going to do with it, as well as tax reform. The president's plan is for $1 trillion over 10 years, mostly funded by tax credits, 167 billion of them to be exact. And leveraging that $167 billion, right, 5 to 1 is what they think they're going to be able to do to help generate that $1 trillion. It's also funded by repatriation, 10% tax on money coming from overseas back into the United States. They say that it will bring in about $150 billion. I don't believe, but this is Terry O'Sullivan, all right? I'm not speaking at all on the administration's proposal. If they do $167 billion of tax credits, right, that $150 billion that comes in, if it comes in a repatriation, will probably go into the general treasury to pay for those tax cuts that corporate America gets. They also have 50, and I've seen the projects, 50 Tier 1 infrastructure projects to start this initiative. I believe that those will be public-private partnerships, because I've seen the list, and most of them would be projects that you could toll or find some revenue stream, all right, because otherwise Wall Street and our pension funds aren't going to invest in anything that doesn't have a revenue stream, right? So first tier is 50 to jumpstart his infrastructure initiative. There's an additional 30, phase 2. Again, this is all predicated on what? It's all predicated on this plan being presented to Congress, being voted on Congress, and God knows what would come out of it. But these are at least the principles of what the President Trump's infrastructure package is all about. Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats have also put infrastructure proposal forth. And again, the good news is that everybody's talking about it, but what the hell are we going to do about it? His and the Senate Democrats is for $1 trillion over 10 years as well. They say it'll create over 15 million jobs, funded by an infrastructure bank. We've heard about an infrastructure bank for how long? Hopefully, if this becomes reality, that the infrastructure bank will be a reality. Various existing grant programs like TIFIA and Tiger program. Those of you from the trades know what that is. Repatriation as well. But in the Senate Democrats' proposal, the repatriation money would go solely towards infrastructure. And by the major funding source is closing corporate and super wealthy tax loopholes. And I might add that it has, as we would expect, Davis-Bacon protections. So, when I was talking to Bill and Barbara yesterday about, what are we going to, where are we going to see on infrastructure? I don't honestly know. Those are two proposals. Who knows? Whatever goes into Congress never comes out the same way. My hope, and I think our hope is that we get real about infrastructure. I always find it ironic in that hellhole of Washington, D.C., which is an unrealistic bubble where common sense and reality never meet, is that we applaud ourselves and pat ourselves on the back as a country and as a Congress when we pass a 5-year, $305 billion highway bill, which is a good start. It was a hell of a lot better than the last 10 years of having nothing but extensions, short-term extensions, which didn't allow State Department of Transportation to plan long-term to build new roads and new bridges instead of just repaving highways, which will take, but won't fix the crumbling transportation infrastructure we have in this country. When the American Society of Civil Engineers says we have a $3.6 trillion problem that we would need to spend today to fix our infrastructure in this country, and then the greatest country there is on the planet puts 5-year, $305 billion towards a $3.6 trillion problem, is really ridiculous when you think about it. We'll take it, but hopefully this administration and this Congress finally figures out how in the hell we're going to fund all these things, whether we like some of them or not. What we need to do is get real, because if we don't get real, right, Chinese spend 10% of their GDP towards infrastructure. We spend 2.5%, right? If we project out, and I'm preaching to the choir, the bridges that we have, the roads that we have, the infrastructure that we have, including not only roads and bridges, but water, we let it go for another 10, 20, 30 years the way we're going, we're going to be we're going to have a third world country infrastructure in this country. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. And I think the American Society of Civil Engineers backs that up. So we have got to get real about this. The encouraging thing is that it's being discussed at the highest levels, and I think at the end of the day, we'll just have to see what happens. Health care. Republican efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. So you've heard me before, and I've heard you before. There's positive aspects of the Affordable Care Act. It's good that more people are covered under the Affordable Care Act. We were against the transitional reinsurance tax. We call it the belly button tax, right? Because we were never a drain in organized labor. Our members were never a drain, or their families, on the health care system in this country. We paid our fair share. And through cost shifting, 25 to 30% of our hourly health and welfare contributions went towards paying for the indigent and the poor, and count us in. But don't count us in when you're taking 25 or 30% and paying for individuals whose employers don't provide health insurance. But at the end of the day, we've been trying to get rid of the Cadillac tax. And we got a moratorium and extension of the implementation of the Cadillac tax. And all the narrow-minded people in D.C. are going, oh, yeah, all right, we're going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and the Cadillac tax is going to go out the window. Well, let me tell you what the Republicans are looking at doing. And I don't know if it's been discussed in detail, but I'm going to give you at least the meetings that I've been involved in and my staff have been involved in, and some of the things that the Republicans in Congress, i.e. the Speaker of the House, are looking at. They're looking at capping the tax exclusion on employer-sponsored health care. Now, like many of you, LIUNA members have an hourly health and welfare contribution that goes to our health and welfare funds for coverage. That contribution is not taxable to our contractors or to our members. There is a draft that is a draft proposal that is expected to go through committee when they return from the President's Day recess next week. Again, don't go back and say that Terry O'Sullivan that said that this is inexact, because it's not. But here's the things that they're talking about. They're talking about taking capping the tax exclusion, right, on health and welfare benefits, and this is at least the first draft proposal. For individuals, cap it at $12,000. For families, cap it at $30,000. What does that mean for our members potentially? So let's say you have an $8 health and welfare contribution, and on average, our members work 1,800 hours. That's $14,400. So family coverage, it doesn't hit 30, so okay, right? Right? But for an individual, it's over 12, so our members would be taxed $2,400 for their health insurance. Pay federal tax, state tax, employee portion of FICA. These are all questions because the devil's in the details. And does the employer then have to pay the employer portion of FICA? So instead of the Cadillac tax taxing our health and welfare funds, this cap would tax our members. How about, and I know for the laborers anyway, and I'm sure for some of the other building trades, maybe some of the other unions that are represented at this conference, how about $10 an hour? 1,800 hours, and again, it's all how much is the hourly contribution and how many hours one works, right? That's $18,000 a year under that scenario. Family would still be safe. Single would have to pay $6,000 in tax. I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to go back and sell that to our members. Now, in our union, we have a different rate for single and a different rate for family at the international. But in our local health and welfare funds, I doubt, and maybe there is, we don't have separate coverage. It's the same hourly contribution that goes into the funds, which is why at the end of the day, right, if they go down this path, our members' benefits, right, for the first time are going to end up possibly being taxed. Of course, it depends on what your hourly contribution is. Of course, it depends on how many hours a member works. But for places like New York, where we have significant market share, where the health and welfare contributions are pretty significant, right, this could affect us right off the bat. Now, we shouldn't be surprised about this because it's not a new idea. John McCain, when he ran for president in 2008, proposed it. Max Baucus, Democratic senator from Montana, head of the Senate Finance Committee, during the Affordable Care Act legislative battles in 2009 and 2010, proposed how to pay for Obamacare taxing benefits. And this is just not for unions. This is for all employer-sponsored, any employer-provided health insurance. Simpson Bowles Budget Commission proposed it in 2011. So I raise it because the devil is in the details. And whether you're a labor representative or a contractor representative, a management representative, brothers and sisters, this is where the rubber meets the road, and amongst a whole host of other things. If they're going to go down a path in the House of Representatives to repeal and replace, and it's going to come off the backs of taxing the health and welfare benefits of our members, I think we need to draw a line in the sand because God knows where that stops. So when you get back home, I hope you'll pay an inordinate amount of attention to what's going on in the weeks to come, because the rollout of the Republican plan to replace Obamacare, I believe, at least today, is going to include a tax on the health and welfare benefits of our members. I want to open it up to questions, but Bill asked me, so what do I see over the next 12 months? I mean, I talked about the meeting with the president, talked about the competing infrastructure plans, and the issues with the rollout of the Republican replacement for the Affordable Care Act. I mean, here's what I see, and some of this is based on the meeting with the president. The energy sector will probably thrive, which for us in the trades, particularly the operating engineers, the UA, the Teamsters, and the laborers, will be a godsend. We have over $50 billion worth of pipeline work on the books right now under PLA. It'll boom, particularly if there's a substantial changes to the permitting and environmental review process for energy and infrastructure projects. On infrastructure in Davis-Bacon, we have to figure out how to pay for it, and that jury is still out. Left to their own drithers, we'll probably have competing proposals, and I'm not sure what gets done, if anything gets done. I will say that we have to make sure that any new infrastructure programs have Davis-Bacon coverage. And we need to work with both Democrats and Republicans to beat back any legislation for the Department of Labor attempts to change how we survey prevailing wage rates from wage and hour to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. How many are familiar with the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Let me tell you what happens if they change the current wage survey process that has been used, tried, true, and has been used since inception. You go to a BLS, which is a different survey process. Let me tell you what happens in New York. These are for laborers. I'm going to round the numbers off. We have a total package of about $80 an hour. BLS, and that's under the current wage survey process. You change it from that to the BLS, $80 goes to $24.51, a 69.3% decrease. Ryan Boyer, my man from Philadelphia, head of our district council in Philadelphia, our total package is $54. That includes wages and benefits. It goes to $19.17, a 64.3% decrease. Pittsburgh, $44.50 goes to $18.30, minus 58.9%. Chicago, anybody here from Chicago? Chicago goes from $66.50 for a labor total package to $27.35. Los Angeles, I'm a California cat, $51.41 now, goes to $20.51. And Newark, New Jersey, last one I'll do. Total package of $65 goes to $24.64. If I wanted to screw the trades and screw the men and women, the proud men and women of the trades, forget about repealing it, right? Because we can beat that in Congress as long as the president and the administration doesn't put their finger on the scale. You change the wage survey process, and we won't need a conference to talk about health and welfare and pension benefits, because we won't be able to provide them anymore with those kind of prevailing wages. BLS, that survey system doesn't take into consideration benefits, and it includes residential construction, which in most instances is a little more than minimum wage, which is why you get the wages that I just put out there. So we're going to have to make sure that we're on our game, that we're working with anybody and everybody that we can to keep our gold standard, Davis-Bacon, and the wage survey process in place, because these are the kind of disastrous results if they forget about repeal and we beat that, but then change the wage survey process. On the health care front, we're going to have to make sure that our members' health benefits aren't taxed. And I didn't talk about right to work, but obviously that Congressman King from Iowa, who is an absolute bum, and if there weren't so many women in this room, I would tell you what I really feel about him, who has put a bill in to repeal not only the Davis-Bacon Act, but to have a national right to work. We have 28 states now that unfortunately are right to work. I have to call out the state of New Hampshire and a great job that they did beating it back. Yeah, give them a round of applause. Well, King's legislation won't go anywhere. At least I don't believe it will. And there are some Republicans in Washington that don't want to see a national right-to-work law. And you know why they don't want to see a national right-to-work law? Because of competition. They like to see, they think a competitive advantage is being a right-to-work state. They don't want everybody else to do it. So we need to work. We don't want it anywhere, right? But we sure as hell don't want 28 to go to 50 because of national legislation. And we're up against it on the right-to-work front across the country to start with. We're up against it about the repeal of state prevailing wage, right, throughout the country. And we've lost it in a whole host of places. If we're going to fight it in the states, we don't want to fight it in Washington, D.C. as well. So before I take questions, look at, you know, I said before, we're going to be up against it for the next 4 years. There's going to be a whole host of a number of things that I think we will, and I think we can work with the president. And we're going to have a tough time with this Congress, to be quite honest. And at the end of the day, I kind of get tired of all the nonsense in D.C. Everybody's crying in their soup, you know, oh, poor me, oh, you know, and to me it's disgusting because of this, because it gets personal. I mean, you know, when times get tough, right, then that's when people need a labor movement, right? They don't need one when things are easy, for God's sake. We're here in this room at this conference, in this movement, where leaders lead. And now is the time for us to lead. Our movement was born out of strife and struggle, out of abuse and exploitation. Our forefathers fought against discrimination and bigotry. You know, we are all founded by courageous leaders who laid their lives on the line for the cause of justice, honor, and equality for all working people. So now it's our time to step up to the plate. It's time to show our resolve, our resiliency, our toughness, and our determination. It's time to show, as I said, that we will work with everybody that we can and fight everyone that we have to. And we will not back up, we will not back down, we will never retreat, and we will never surrender, and never compromise the principles of our unions and our movement. My dad died 10 months ago, and he was a proud Marine, and I'm sure there's plenty of Marines in this room. And thank you for all of you, to anybody that has served and fought for our country, no matter what branch of service that you come from. My dad always used to say, Semper Fi, always faithful. Find a way or make one. Actions, not words. I can't think of words that are any more appropriate than when we find ourselves today, brothers and sisters. Semper Fi to all of us, right? It'll be our fight, it'll be our vision, it'll be our leadership and our ability to work, maybe in difficult situations that will define the legacy of the leadership that's in this room and in this movement today. So in our union, our motto is feel the power. So may you feel the power, may you be the power, and may you always use the power. Thank you. God bless each and every one of you.
Terry, as always, sincere thanks, and let's use this as an opportunity. A lot of things touched on. You know, you're hearing really insights from this Dust Bowl, this ongoing dynamic environment that is Washington, but the wider country as well. Questions or comments? Right over here in the middle. Chris, I think it is, if I can.
Good morning. Another dynamic speech, my brother. But when you say draw a line in the sand, could you interpret that? Because I heard another guy drew a red line in Syria, didn't work out so well. So could you tell me what that means?
As far as drawing a line in the sand?
Right.
Well, I think we need to draw a line in the sand on the things, the principles of of our organizations and of our movement. That's what I meant. I think that, as always, I mean, we've never gotten anything done without Republican help. I mean, I can speak for the trades only. I won't speak for them, but at the end of the day, I mean, we've always worked with Republicans. We consider ourselves a bipartisan organization. We disagree with we're going to disagree with a lot of things that happen. We need to do that. I mean, to me, draw a line in the sand means I'm going to do everything I can to make sure my members' benefits aren't taxed, right? That's for damn sure. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that the Davis-Bacon Act doesn't go away. I'm going to do everything I can, and you're going to do the same thing to make sure we don't have a national right-to-work law. You know? And that's coming from Congress. And that's what I mean by drawing a line in the sand. I don't think that there's much compromise on those kinds of things. I'm not saying that we never will, right? But you tell me if you think differently, right? Do we want to go down the path of taxing our members' health and welfare benefits? Anybody? Do we want to shit can or change the Davis-Bacon Act or change the way that the wage survey process goes and have those kind of wages? I know laborers don't need representation for those kind of numbers. I know we won't be in the benefit business. So that's what I mean by drawing a line in the sand. And I am not of the mindset that all we ought to do for the next 4 years, and I think this is foolish and stupid and ignorant, right? And it bothers me in D.C. that let's spend 4 years doing nothing but throwing rocks. You know what? I know laborers have to eat over the next 4 years, right? Maybe some other elitists may have enough of money that they don't give a damn, right? We're going to work with everybody, and we'll draw the lines on the principled things that define your union, my union, our union, and our movement. No more, no less. And as I said before, we'll work with the president everywhere we can. We'll work with the Congress everywhere that we can, right? But what we're not going to do is stand idly by. We're not going to just be obstructionists for the sake of being obstructionists to wait for another election. That's what I mean by it, brother.
Additional comments, questions? He's not that intimidating, really. We've touched base on, I mean, Davis-Bacon, certainly a watchful eye on this health care cap. Is there a generic term we should be watching for in that regard that is out there being floated in this regard in terms, you know, again, of looking at that $12,000 or $30,000 cap?
It has certainly been discussed, Bill.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't make those numbers up. And again, those numbers could change. I'm not, you know, by the time the words got out of my mouth, there could be a different proposal. I'm just telling you, in the meetings that we have participated in the discussions that we have been part of, the whole issue of taxing health and welfare benefits, that hasn't been one discussion. It has been numerous discussions going forward. Because the Republicans have a problem. And the problem is, it's one thing to say repeal something, all right? And they've gotten a lot of hell and a lot of criticism about what are you going to replace it with. Okay. Then the question becomes, how are you going to pay for it? And I'm telling you, one of the biggest ways that from their perspective to pay for it is to tax our members' benefits. And my concern, you know, I gave you some examples, and some might say, well, it doesn't affect us now. Well, how about if they freeze those caps, and every year we go from 6%, 10%, 15% increase in our medical costs? Someday you're going to run up against it if we go down this path. And I think that it behooves us. Actually, I think it is critically important that we make sure that there isn't caps on our benefits. We never had them before, and if we go down this path, I think we're going to be in trouble from here on out.
So, I mean, without question, an added spotlight, a watchful eye maybe on this health care cap. Certainly the evolving issue of a national right-to-work law. Certainly another element. Again, our goal in all cases is put things on radars perhaps that aren't currently on there, or at least emphasize them. Terry, you said it so eloquently when you paraphrased I guess your dad when you said we need to find a way or make one. And I think if anything we can take away from your call to all of us is that. And Additionally, certainly the idea of not throwing rocks, as you say, for 4 years, but rather engaging where you can and fighting where you need to. And that's an opportunity I think we all need to move forward on. Sincere thanks. Join me in thanking
Hold on,
Terry.
Bill.
Whoop.
Thank you,
Oh,
Bill.
we got a question here. We do have a
Dan.
question.
Yeah, Danny Kane of Teamsters. As always, dynamic, Terry, and bring the house down wherever you speak. And I think the issues you point out, to use your analogy, throw rocks. I don't want to have to throw the rocks, but we have to have a rock. We have to have some power, right? Because talk is cheap, and these folks have constantly, for the last 35 years, labor movements have been on the run. No other way to put it. Probably, if you look at the history of the movement in the last 35 years, to survive, you've done a hell of a job. To survive in this anti-union country, and that's what it is. One of the things that could be an Achilles heel to those that see the labor movement as obstructionist, I throw it out there. If they do attempt to try to tax health and welfare benefits, would be a monumental change since 1950, I would say, right? Since benefits became, not just our benefits would be taxed, but all the country's benefits would be taxed. It could be an issue by which to get a rock, is my point. It could be an issue across the spectrum. Richer workers, poorer workers, different workers from different parts of the country, union, non-union, would see that as an attack on the working class. I don't think there's a worker in the country, whether they're pro-union or anti-union, would think that that was a step in the right direction. That might be a way for us to awaken some movement outside of our own circumstance. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to have the Stephen Kings. We're going to continue to have this anti-union stuff. I used to say, people say, Dan, how come you guys support the Democrats? I said, because they'll kill us in 30 years. The other guys will just kill us in 4. So when I heard that this might be a possibility, I like your comments. Look, this is our time. And this might be, but our time needs an issue. And if we can use an issue to galvanize the country outside our own people, that could be a help, and that could give us that rock.
Could this be that cross-cutting issue, Terry?
So it actually goes to the conversation we had yesterday. And Dan, thanks for the question, and thanks for the great job that you do, the Teamsters. Look, we talk about labor management cooperation, but we better do a better job of perfecting it, right? And to that point, Dan, I know my wife Yvette is here, who oversees our legislative and political department, our communications department, and our PAC. We're part of a group, as are other unions, Unite Here, and I think carpenters and some other building trades, called Fight the 40, for that very issue. Is that health care, because it's just not an assault for our funds, for union funds, but for everybody that has employer-provided insurance, I think you're right. How do we reach out through Fight the 40? There's all sorts of companies that are part of it. So we're collectively fighting against taxing benefits as we collectively fought against the Cadillac tax. And I think we need to do more of it. On the Davis-Bacon front, we've got the American Petroleum Institute, right? Some people would hold their nose, but we work with them. And a whole host of other contractor associations and whatnot to partner together against the repeal of prevailing wage or going to the BLS system. And I think that Lou's vision for this conference is, I can't stand here, I'd be full of you-know-what, for me to tell you the solutions to all the problems, but I know that when we leave here working with groups, that might be the rock. You're right. Is the rock to say, all right, wait a minute, now you've gone a step too far on taxing benefits, just not for union men and women, but for employer-provided health insurance for corporations, for companies across this country. Could very well be. What we need to do is, as you said, take advantage of that. And I think that cooperation, if it's a union issue, right, sometimes it's dead on arrival. But if we really do partner together as labor and management, I do think that in these stormy seas, that we can make a difference. Answer it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Terry O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, as always.